Hey homies, what's up? Ryan Wynn here with another episode of Late Night INKS. And before we get started and meet tonight's guest, I'd like to show you this very cool Xerox copy of a page from Spawn 84, page 11, pencils by Greg Capullo, inks by Danny Mickey. I found a little stash of these that I had from when I was Danny Mickey's apprentice that we used to study from, and I thought I'd share it with you. But that's not till later. First, let's see what Lobo has to say about that. Ooh, frag off, fanboy. It's a low blow, Lobo. It's time for Late Night INKS.
If us any chance, we'll take it. Read us any rules, we'll break it. We're gonna make our dreams come true. Doing it our way.
All right, everybody. As you can see, as you saw in the intro, our guest of honor tonight is Lobo himself. This is sort of a mix between the original version that I saw, My First Lobo by Kevin Maguire in, Justice League 16 or something like that. 16 or 17. There was 2 issues where he came in and he fought with the Justice League, and Guy Gardner. There were some great covers, and Kevin Maguire was the artist on that. Mateus and Giffen were writing it. But this is a little mix of that version with the beefier, uppier Simon Bisley one that came out in 1990. I always liked both. They're definitely very different. The original version was much creepier to me. He was a little more he kind of reminded me of like Prince and Beetlejuice put together, but he was a trained assassin that had pet dolphins in space. So, our weapon of choice tonight is my favorite brush, Stinger, the Raphael 8404, size 2. We are using Rapidograph, Black India Ultra Draw. And we dip the brush about 2/3 to, about 2/3, halfway to 2/3. Wipe it off a little on the inside of the jar. Make sure you get a nice point. If you have a scrap paper, scrap paper on the side, you could use that. I'm going to take a swig of water. And at this point, I like to have the brush pretty heavy with ink because we're going to be doing the contours, the outlines first. And I think we're going to start with this big old collar line. And we are going to be cutting him off at the collar. That's our design choice for the piece. And as always, I have got a big beefy chin on these characters. Let me make sure I am in frame. My camera's in a little bit different of a position tonight. Gonna see if that turns out better or worse. So I was a kid when that issue came out, and like always, I should have done more research before I start talking about this stuff. But I wasn't really a DC fan. I was always more of a Marvel kid, except for Batman. I really liked Batman. Superman was cool, but only sometimes, and usually only when Batman was involved. So when the issue with Lobo came out, I thought, oh man, who's this awesome character? The first cover had he and Guy Gardner almost butting heads, like holding each other's collars ready to fight. I think Lobo had the upper hand or was the alpha character in the image, and then the next issue it was reversed with Guy Gardner being the in the heroic position. And I think I saw it the month the second issue came out, because I think I remember seeing both issues. I think it had to be 11 or 12. Let's see, let's make sure we're not gonna hit any wet points. Draw. All right. Do the ear in one foul swoop. Anyways, the cover caught my eye. I started reading it. I didn't realize Batman had been in that series, so I was like, oh, okay. And Kevin Maguire's art, even as a kid, it really stood out. The facial expressions and just how good his draftsmanship is. That kind of stuff always stood out to me, especially from around age 10 on. I started really paying attention to what artists were doing what The writing still, probably until I was like 12 or 13, I wasn't super picky about writing. All right, so obviously we have skipped on from the contours. I know we didn't do the hair. Oh, we didn't do this neckline here. Let's do his neck. We're going to do the hair after we do some of the face, because that's the way I roll. I don't really consider... Oh, still missed this line. Being all braggy, like, that's the way I roll. No, miss the cigar. We'll go a little thinner on top of the cigar, and we'll go heavier on the bottom. And this part of the collar is going to be black, drop behind his chin to help him pop, so you can do that nice and beefy. And if you ink like me, you don't mind lines not meeting up. There's a little bit of crossover. When I'm inking other people, like when I used to ink superhero comics and things like that, I would definitely be very picky about some of those lines. But for my own work, I just like the brush lines to be pretty and confident, and I don't really care if the edges line up. I don't even know if you can tell on camera, but this line that creates the cheek kind of extends past this line a little, and I don't really mind that stuff. Back in the day, some of the heavy brush inkers would do that stuff and then take a little bit of white out, because you wanna have follow through with your brush strokes so that you can get that super confident, cool line. Or sometimes if you have to stop short with something, it kind of affects the shape of the line or the confidence of the stroke, and you want to avoid that if possible. All right, we're going to get the underside of that lip curl, and then this is where his stash meets the lip, and then the underside of the lip where it goes to meet the upper side of the lower lip. And then we've got this lip here, down like that. And then before we do the teeth, we're going to finish out the mouth. There's the upper part of the lower lip. Now, can't talk. Let's do the lower part of the lower lip. All right. Then there's a little bit of space before you get to the part where his jaw protrudes. We'll do some rendering there. And then I gotta wash the brush off a little. Ring that water bell jar. See how we're doing on time. 6 minutes in. I'm getting better at starting the inking at around a minute in. I need to get it down to starting the inking at right when I start the video. That would be ideal, but for some reason I can't seem to do that. I don't script these things out, obviously. I just wing it as we go. I would like to take a moment to thank all of you that regularly watch and participate. Even if you only stop by every once in a while or participate once or twice and move on, it's fun to have any of you here. Always feel free to ask questions about anything, as long as I'm in the chat when it is premiering. And those of you watching this when it's not premiering, all right, wait, time out. I added a little shadow under the nose there, just the tiniest. Okay, so when I post these videos, when they first premiere, I'm live in the chat. I'm not doing the videos live yet so that I can sort of ink freely and not have to stop to answer questions. But if you guys are here when it's premiering, you can ask me questions as if it's live and I will answer because I'm live in the chat. All right, so now I'm doing these renderings, sort of like whipping these lines, as you can see. And those I call like airplane lines, and I call those that in my head because when I was learning to ink with Danny Mickey, he taught me about, it's like an airplane landing and taking off with these brush strokes, whooshum, 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 like that. All right, we are almost getting ready to do the eyes and hair. Let's do some little cigar folds. Just these little lines there. And then we can bear down a little here where it's the ashy end, and then have a few little bits falling off. There we go. All right, let's do the rendering lines on these neck muscles. Again, we line up our shot. We kind of want to land up here with these, and we're going to whip the wrist. The elbow is locked in place, and you just do swipes like that. And there you go. We'll come back and do those shadows afterwards. All right, we got these lines here that sort of set his jaw into his cheeks. And then we've got these little rendering lines under the nose here. Got a good sharp tip on the brush right now, so we can do these. Where I am very picky about my lines and my line weights is in the faces. I get looser around the edges and stuff like that, but when I'm doing the nose and mouth and eyes, I get a little bit pickier. I'm the same with hands, because hands and faces, they tell our stories. Okay, what is next? I shouldn't have done that shadow. That's still a little bit wet. So what you can do sometimes, you can do it with a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be a Post-it note, but I've got a wet spot there and a wet point there. But if you have a Post-it note, you can do this with it. You stick it down away from it, and then you can slowly lay it flat like that. And then don't wipe or anything, but you can press down a little. And you don't want to do that for a heavy wet spot. This is stuff that was just about to dry, and there's barely a mark there, so we are good. It's just a little bit glossy, so I wanted to make sure. All right, I'm going to take a swig of water and put a little more ink on the brush. Now, as you get into your projects, whether you're inking now or inking later, just keep in mind, never dip that brush too much. It's not going to kill it right away. You can always wash it out, but you just don't want to get too much ink gummed up in the ferrule of the brush. Up in here. So now we want to do some of these heavier spots. We're going to do his mustache. And you'll see here I'm pinching the board and curving it up like that. And that curve presses the rest of the board flat against the desk. Because sometimes the paper will have a little bit of a mind of its own, a little bit of a wave or a curve. All right, you can go a little heavier on these outlines because they're going to be solid black. I know it looks like I have pencil rendering on this version, but the version you have will be solid, and you can fill in the black however you want. Especially if you're turning in like a dummy. I shoot these things on my phone. And I forgot to delete the other videos that I had already had on there, so the space filled up, and we missed a section when I got to this hair. So, anyways, starting over for me, I have dipped the jar, we've done these chunks of hair, and we're getting into it here. I was saying that something I need to start doing at the beginning of these videos is remembering to mention that these are ink-alongs, and that you guys can join in. You can print up this image, or any of the images that are used in any of the videos. In the description below, they have a link to a file that you can print up, and you can ink along at your own leisure, or try to keep up with me. And then if you've got, if you're up for it, if you're brave enough, if you've got the courage, you can share it with me and I can put it in one of my videos. So I am very excited to share the artist we had do an ink along this last week. It is a very well-known, very talented inker that I've known online for many years. Don't think we ever met in person. I have a horrible memory, and I tend to say nice to meet you to people when they say nice to see you again. And then they think I'm too cool for them, which I mean, come on. It's me, so right? I mean, come on. But in reality, I'm just a dummy, and I forget people. And I don't want to be that guy, but that's who I am. So, enough of my sad psychological moments there. Let's get back into making sure we heavy up these hairlines that are not his hairline. That's a weird term, but the lines we're using for his hair as it goes behind the nape of his neck there. And I just elbowed the camera. Sorry about that. All right, we are coming along pretty well. I think I'm ready to do some of this rendering now. We're gonna go in here, and this is very similar to some of the other headshots we've had. The shadow that you do under this lip, it's almost always going to be very similar. Heavier in the middle. Sometimes you can go solid black if you want, and then thin and open up as it spreads out. And that helps give dimension to the shape, because we are working with 2 dimensions and we want it to feel like 3 dimensions. And we'll do those bleeds under that chin to sort of create a shape there. And then I also want to give him, it's not so much a butt chin that he's got. He's got a little bit of a cleft in the Kevin McGuire ones, but then he's got this secondary little chin bump there where the musculature does that. All right, let's not forget the teeth. Bearing down on that cigar. All right, and now we can do these cheekbones. So just like the other lines, you can whip them like this if you want, or you can do blunt stops like that. I like to mix it up, as you see. And then that pulls up into his hairline that where the hair is going back behind the ear. And I'm not going to do that line on the ear. I'm just going to have those hairlines stop there and sort of hint at that. But while I am here, I'm going to hit up these little shadows that you would have on these ears. Little shadow pockets. All right, going to wash the brush. Wipe a little water off on a paper towel, dip it in the jar halfway to 2/3, then sharpen it on the inside of the brush, or sorry, the inside of the brush, on the inside of the ink jar. And let's see, I'm gonna do like a chisel shape here on the underside, a little double chisel shape there, beef it up on the cigar, and then some heavy rendering like this. And again, adds dimension and shape to our object. So you can see we've got this light ridge going here, which is a black shape pushing up from the head into the hair, and then a black shape pushing from the tips to the center. And that, again, gives dimension, and it's sort of a cool way to stylize highlights on hair. I do a sort of a mix of real and anime hair, I guess, comic booky hair. I draw a lot from anime in the way it groups and bunches and stuff. It's almost like the same lines as we do our diamond lines with our brush. It's a bunch of these just repeated in different varying lengths and shapes. But then I like to have a little fun stylizing it in this way. So I'm going to be bearing down and just doing start and stop lines. It's not any kind of official title, but just so you know how I'm approaching this. Excuse me. Here at the high point, we'll spread them out the most. And then as we wrap around the head, we'll start thickening them up. They'll be heavy here under that because that's a shadowed part under there. And then we'll keep beefing them up. And just keep turning the page, and watch out with this hand not to hit any of that wet ink. And as I've said many times before, and I think even earlier in this video, all of my lines are just merely suggestions. Do not feel that you have to trace them perfectly. Sometimes that's actually harder to do, but just let them be a guide for you to do your own thing over them. All right, see, it's starting to come along there. We're going to be doing a similar effect on his left side, our right side of the sheet on this collar here. All right, get in a little more ink, and let's see, too much ink on that one. Okay, here we go. On this side, that's all dry, so we're safe here. Now these I'm going to go thin to thick as we pull away, or sort of maybe more like medium to thick as we pull away. And I'm going to come back and do that shadow after I do this part. So that's the shadow of that piece on there. And we'll do the same thing here. No, not heavy enough. Not heavy enough. There we go. Don't be afraid to just go back in and beef stuff up. All right, that wasn't even exactly how I'd want that line to go, but we're gonna live with it for now. Because you can always white stuff out. You can always black stuff in. However you want. You are in control of the image. My brush is starting to dry up a little, but I sometimes like when it does that. It adds a little bit of variety to the texture, but you still want your lines to have that confidence. That's what I'm always telling you guys. The brush strokes, no matter what you're doing, you want to have a lot of confidence in those lines and that movement. Okay, we need to heavy it up again. All right. Really loading it up here. We are going to put some heavy black in here. That was a little too dry for me. And they were sitting there bragging about like, oh, it's okay to do dry brush. And then I pulled back and was like, oh gosh, you're ruining it, Ryan. All right, that's much better. Oh, sorry, I hit the camera again. It's a new setup I'm trying out. I'll either get used to it or I won't. We'll see. Okay, there we go. Now I think we're ready to do this shadow under the ear, which I'm doing some blunt chisel shape start and stops. I bleed out there. I'm gonna do the same thing here. Let's see, we're gonna make this solid over here. And you know what? We're gonna solidify that to help his head pop off his neck. And then we'll go nice and heavy. And see, now these are a mix of the start and stop and our diamond lined, which is our airplane swoop, and then we can go into our swoop as we fade out like that. All right, looking good. Let's really load up the brush now. Find a safe place for our right hand. It's all dry there. Let's go in and let's fill out that tattooed stash, whatever it is. This I don't know. I don't remember if they ever explained it in any of the Lobo series. I didn't read the entire like when he had his long series run, I didn't read very many of that. I've read a lot of the Simon Bisley like 1 and 2 issue stories and things like that. So there's a lot of Lobo lore I probably don't know. I know they did something pretty weird with the New 52 stuff where it was some like hip other young Lobo came in and was like, oh, I'm the real Lobo. You gotta shut up, old Lobo. And like cut his head off or something. Cut the Bisley version's head off. I mean, come on. You can't do that. Alright, so when I have the brush loaded up this heavy, actually anytime, whenever I use the brush, I don't scribble. You don't want to scribble with your brush. If you've used markers and you're used to going like that, that is not what you want to do with a brush. That will twist up the hairs, and you will not be a happy camper with that. So even if it looks like I've scrubbed back and forth there, I'm lifting up. I'm only hitting the paper in one direction. And if you are using markers and you do that scribble technique, I recommend at least getting as big a marker as you can, and you want to do things in as few brush strokes as possible. Man, once you fill in that stash in those eyes, that's where it really becomes Lobo. All right, let me see if we've got our big brush handy. We do. I'm gonna load up the big brush with a little water and a lot of ink. And this is just a big synthetic brush that I have for such things. And one reason I like to work with the brush and do nice heavy lines on my figures is that when I go in to fill in the blacks like this, let me make sure I'm in camera. When I go in to fill in the blacks like this, you don't have to worry so much about crossing over from this black area into the white area of his chin or his neck. Okay, and here I'm gonna outline our highlight first, which is a curved shape pushing that way, and then sort of an S shape there. I think I'm gonna heavy up his hair in there too. Yeah. Oh, see? And there I was like, oh, I don't have to worry about doing that, crossing over. And there I did it. But that's sloppy brushmanship on the Ink King's part. And you're bound to see that every once in a while. And I like to keep it raw, keep it real. That's why my initials are RAW. That's not why they are, but that's what I like to say. All right, there we go. Now it's flowing. So this is, you can't tell, but this is one of those white synthetic hairs. It's synthetic haired brushes. I got a batch of them at the Japanese stationery store. And they're fun for doing things like this. They actually, you can get really good lines with them. Not always accurate, thin lines, but you can get some pretty fun, beefy lines with them. Okay, we gotta let that dry for a minute. Put our brushes aside. And for the rest of this, I'm going to break out a marker. This is the Zebra Sensations brush marker. As with everything else, there is a link below. I like to do these bouncy lines. You don't have to follow them exactly. I'm not even following my original pencil lines. I'm just following the idea. And then we've got our boxy word balloon here. And you don't have to make that super clean either. I'm doing start and stop lines. There we go. Now I don't want to cross over onto a wet area again. Let's see, can we pull this off, folks? All right, that's, I'm in a dry area, that's, all right, I think I got it. I think I can do this. I'm resting just on my knuckle over the eye, because the eye's got a little bit of wet spot, and that's got a little bit of a wet spot there, so let's hit this. So if you're inking along, you don't have to do these kind of challenges for yourself, but sometimes when you're on a crazy deadline, you don't have time to wait for ink to dry, and you have to keep moving across that page. And if you don't, your editors will tell you to frag off, fanboy. There we go. Lobo. I'm going to sign it here. If you're inking along, go ahead and sign below. And you can send me a link to it below, in the comments below, or you can hit me up on Twitter at Ryan Wynn. I'd love to see what anyone does. It's not about your skill set. It's about joining in and having fun with it. That's what we're here to do. And thank you to all of you that joined in for the live chat during the premiere of this video. And stay tuned. We're going to take a look at that Capullo Mickey page here in just a second. So until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and take it easy.